And the younger of them said to the father, Father, give me the share of your property that belongs to me. And he divided his living between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in loose living. And when he had spent everything, a great famine arose in the country, and he began to be in want. So he went and joined himself to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed the swine. And he would gladly have fed on the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. treat me as one of your hired servants." And he arose and came to his father. But while he was yet at a distance, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated.
It became clear to me as I was doing research, exegesis as we call it, as preachers, on this particular scripture passage, that the younger son struggles with FOMO. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering a little bit about that statement. The younger son. What do I mean by the younger son? Well, this is a parable that no doubt we have probably heard growing up. I've probably listened to several times in Sunday school. I've probably heard several preachers preach on this particular passage. And you may not have heard it this way. You may have heard it referred to, help me out, as the parable of the prodigal son. Okay? And so why do we say the younger son? Well, the reason why I want us to rethink this is we are doing a sermon series over these next 3 weeks on this whole parable, each week looking at a different person in the parable. This is considered the master parable of the parables that Jesus gives to us. This is the parable that is set up by 2 other parables, the lost sheep and the lost coin. And deep within this parable are numerous lessons. And sometimes when we say prodigal, we limit it to one. And so it is important that we understand what the word prodigal means, because that word is, again, this sermon series, it is about prodigal. And the word prodigal means extravagant or recklessly wasteful. And that becomes a little easier for us to understand. A lot of us may have grown up with that word, prodigal son, but we may not have really been able to grab hold of just what the word prodigal itself means. We do refer to prodigal sometimes when we refer to someone who is coming home after a long absence. But a lot of times we struggle with what is the prodigal, and here I want to address this question from the outset, a question that will take 3 weeks for us to answer. Who is the prodigal in this parable? And so, today we want to talk about the younger son. But you notice I said that the younger son struggles with FOMO? A lot of you were scratching your head and going, what is FOMO? What is FOMO? FOMO is a word that it is an acronym, and as Methodists, we're big on acronyms. And it is an acronym that is out there in popular culture today, and it's fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. Now, we have had acronyms for a long, long time. So before we start saying, oh, this is something new, we've had acronyms for over 2,000 years scrawled on walls in Rome. This is nothing new. And yet this acronym may be new to us because we may not have heard it before. But the truth of the matter is that the fear of missing out is something that has been with us for quite some time. How many times in our week do we see in our own lives or the lives of those around us a fear, experience that fear of missing out? I was reading a study this week, and it was on cell phone use. And most of the people who have cell phones now don't just have cell phones, we have smartphones. And those smartphones are phones that it is important for us to check for fear of missing out on what may be going on around us. We have apps that keep us informed, apps that tell us about what is going on. The average person, I was reading this week, this is average, so you might be on the high end, you might be on the low end. The average person, did you know this? 52 times a day checks their phone. And I thought, no, that's not possible. So I calculated over the course of 3 hours how many times I checked my phone. 10 times. Right there. We do it a whole lot more than we realize. And that is one thing that points to that fear of missing out. But it is certainly not all of it. And we may not be guilty with that. We may say, well, I'm a preacher, I never check my phone, so that's not my issue, that's somebody else's issue. But there are lots of other ways that we have fear of missing out. My grandmother was a big soap opera person, and she could never miss a soap opera for fear of missing out. Right? And sometimes our children have to be involved. I know this, the struggle is real, in so many activities for fear of missing out on what they are not going to have, what they are not going to experience. That fear of missing out is permeates all through our culture. And here we have a younger son who comes to his father fearful of missing out on that world that is out there and that adventure that is out there. He has been stuck at home. He has just been doing a little bit to get by, but he is ready to fly the coop. And he is ready to do what he needs to do to fly the coop. The scripture puts it this way. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. Now you need to know that when this is not a very common thing to do. Most of us would say what again? We, as children of parents and grandparents, oftentimes we are not in the business of going to our father or to our grandparents or whoever would be over an estate and say, give me my share of the property now. Because what that symbolized is it symbolized death. It symbolized the brokenness of a relationship. The father was essentially dead to that younger son. And his actions continue to prove that. It was more important that he not miss out on all that world that was out there. And he was willing to live recklessly so that he would not miss out. He was willing to spend whatever, wherever, so that he would not miss out on what was going on. Because surely the grass is always greener on the other side. We have adage after adage in our culture about what is better over there. And we sometimes go through seasons in our lives where we compare ourselves to others because we think that others have it much better than we do. And so this younger son asked for his share of the property. He divided his property between them. And note that the younger son did not get the same as the older son. The older son got twice as much as the younger son by Jewish custom, by Jewish rule. And yet it was still plenty. He still went out and squandered it. It says, a few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. That means a non-Jewish land. And there he squandered his property in dissolute, or Jackie's reading, loose living. Scripture doesn't say exactly what that is. We may have grown up with the word that they were prostitutes. We're not sure that that's what was going on, but there was money being spent recklessly with abandonment. When he had spent everything, wouldn't you know it, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. The man who had plenty of land to live with on his whole life sold that in a gamble and lost. And here he does not have any land on which to raise any grain or anything. So what does he do? But it says he goes, hires himself out to a citizen of that country, goes to feed the pigs. And Jews did not associate with pigs. Jews did not associate with swine. Well, there were some things that he was afraid of missing out on. He got to experience that too. But that was not what he was afraid of missing out on. And so the younger son sits himself in a predicament as he is there in the muck, as he is grabbing those carrot pods, which have been quite prevalent in that part of the world, those carrot pods, and he was eating them to get by. And he had this sudden revelation. And Scripture says, he came to himself, verse 17. It is that moment. It's that turning point on which this part of the parable hinges. When he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired hands, who are essentially in this position that I am in, have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. So he's calculating the cost. He's adding this up in his head. He's thinking, I have lost everything. And if I could just have enough to get by on. There's a change of heart that goes on when it says, verse 17, but he came to himself. And how many times in our lives do we realize we are going through seasons where we experience that FOMO? And then all of a sudden, there is that conversation, there is that encounter, there is that person, there is that circumstance that makes us come to ourselves and realize, this ain't all it's cracked up to be. This is far from it. What will I do? And then we are faced with the quandary. Do we suck it up and do something about it? Or do we die? See, this was a culture that was steeped in shame and pride. Now, in our culture today, shame and pride do not share the same space and the same importance as they do in the Middle East, and as they do today in the Middle East, as they did back then in Israel and Palestine, that part of the world. Shame and pride were paramount. And at first it looks like the younger son has no shame whatsoever, but is full of pride. But all of a sudden, it says, when he came to himself and he realized the truly impoverished state, not just of his stomach, but of his soul, he says, you know what? I'm willing to forego some of this pride that I have built up. And I'm willing to experience some of this shame, if it just means that I can help get back to a place where I can feed myself. He had been humbled. He had been humbled in the hardest of all possible ways. And my hope and my prayer is that you never have to go through that kind of humility that he had to experience in the parable. But looking out upon this congregation, I'm sure there are some of you who have been through similar circumstances and similar dire straits. You have experienced that brokenness. You have experienced that estrangement. in a relationship. And maybe it was accidental. Maybe you didn't mean to cut that tie off. Maybe you just found yourself eager to leap ahead, eager to get to the next step. Maybe it was accidental, but maybe now you're sitting there in that place of squalor, and you're sitting in that muck and that mud, and you're sitting with those pteropods, and you're like, what can I do about it? But the good news is that you don't have to stay in that muck. The good news is that you don't have to live there. This younger son realized that, and so he goes back. He turns around. He comes up with this thought, what can I do? I will get up and go to my father. I will say to him, Father, I sin against heaven and before you, against God and before you. The sin is double-fold. Because again, this Jewish property that you were not to sell and was to remain in the family that was a gift from God had been sold, and this sin is a sin against God and his Father. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands, the lowest of the low. I would gladly take the bread, the crumbs under the table. So he set off and went to his father. I don't know what your life has held. I don't know where you have experienced that fear of missing out. It may not have been electronic. It may be something much more real. But whatever it is, there is grace that is offered. Whatever it is, there is a table that is open to you. Whatever it is not the end story. This younger son sees that even in humility, he can come back to his father. He's worried it's not going to be like it was before. We'll address that in a few weeks' time. But here in this moment, know that God is reaching out to you. Know that God is at work in your life, clinging on to you, saying, if you've been away, come back. If there's something that you have missed out on, don't worry. I have more than enough. Bread on top of the table, crumbs under the table, wherever. This is an open table. The crumbs are broken for us this Sunday and every Sunday. We may be struggling with where we're at, but this table is not a place that is ever closed. It is open to all. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.